What's going on, everyone? It's Rick Barrett from Welcome Back to the Barrett Breakdown, the show where we cut through the noise, drop the talking points, and have real conversations that actually matter. Now, if you're new here, I want to let you know that this is not a show that wants to play it safe. I'm here to ask questions most people will avoid and give my guests, more importantly, the freedom to flesh out their answers so that way their positions are well known. There's no gotcha questions, there's no cutting off, there's no arguing. This is really an opportunity for my guests to really get their positions out there, whether it's politics, culture, faith, or freedom, or any number of subjects. This show is about honest talk from real people who aren't afraid to challenge whatever narrative they have set to challenge. Now, today's guest is somebody you definitely want to hear from, Kenny Cody, who is an opinion editor for Human Events. And by the end of this conversation, which we will talk about a lot of things, in particular, how populism was a gift to the GOP that they don't know what to do with. And I think you're going to want to hear that because you're going to have a whole different opinion about it after this conversation is done. So sit back, grab a drink, grab a smoke, grab a snack, and relax because the Barrett Brief is starting now. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's bring on our guest, Kenny Cody, who is the opinion editor at Human Events. Mr. Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me. And how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Rick. Thanks for having me on, brother. Looking forward to speaking with your audience and just trying to explain my position on the Republican Party. Glad you are willing to have open and honest conversations. I think they're much needed in the alternative media sphere, so I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, sir. So we're gonna bring this article up, your article up on screen that you wrote for Human Events, and I think it is very timely and it needs to be discussed, especially since the GOP, for lack of a better term, I don't want to say civil war because it's such a cliche, but there is a lot of tension, a lot of sniping back and forth in the GOP right now, and it seems to be centered in two camps. This populism versus the traditional GOP establishment swamp, whatever you want to call it. There's a million names for it. And then a subset of that seems to be younger conservatives, your Gen Zs, versus your old school, old guard conservatives who don't want to really pay attention to their needs or don't think it's, they should have their issues addressed. Kind of the, wait your turn, son type of deal. And I find this article very interesting. There's going to be a link in the show notes, folks, if you want to check it out. And especially now in the last couple months, Kenny, people have started to either check out or feel very dismayed with the America First movement, or not even very America First movement, how Trump appears to be doing in the White House. We all know the disastrous interview he did with Fox where he said Americans don't have talent and we need 600 billion Chinese students and all these other kinds of things. What are you seeing here with populism, which the GOP stumbled into? They were not planning to be a populist party until Donald Trump essentially bullied them into being one. And now they just don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the issue that the Republican Party has been dealing with for some time. I mean, they outright rejected it in the 1990s with Patrick Buchanan trying to influx a lot of that nationalist populist ideology into the GOP in the late 90s, and he outright just rejected it. I mean, it's kind of, I wrote an article last week about how the Republican Party also needed to reject the teachings, not reject necessarily, but kind of lay the teachings of William F. Buckley by the wayside and adopt the ideologies of Wilmore Kendall and Pat Buchanan. And I think that's still true today. And even in 2012, I mean, as much as, sometimes my ideology kind of, combats and goes head to head with the libertarians of the world. I think Ron Paul was a populist in 2012. And one of the best examples is how the Republican Party kind of pushed him literally off the side. If they would have had a plank for Ron Paul to walk out on during the 2012 Republican primary, they would have made him walk it. I mean, that the Republican Party for such a long time has been the party of rejecting the populist mindsets, and the article kind of goes into that a little bit. The three biggest wins I think of the last 50 years of Republican politics that's actually had an impact in creative movements was the Tea Party movement of 2010-2012. It was the Reagan Revolution of the 1980s, and it was Donald Trump of the Make America Great Again movement, the America First movement in 2016 to 2025. And I still, it's amazing to me that the Republican Party sits back and watches these wins happen and watches these people really flock to a movement and flock to an ideology that is actually answering to the promises and actually to the questions that the Republican Party poses to its voters, like what do you want to see us care about? What do you want to see us talk about? What do you want to see us prioritize? Populism listens to that. Nearly all populism is, it's the common man, it's the elite, and it's when the Republican Party or fill in the blank party or movement takes a issue or a multitude of issues that independents or the GOP Republican voters or anybody that's voting in any election period, what their biggest concerns are, and finding solutions that align with their ideology on it. And every time the Republican Party has done that in mass and actually adopted that, it's won. Look at Teddy Roosevelt. In the late 1800s, he had to start an entire third party movement that began as a populist mindset that eventually made the GOP of that time adopt that ideology and use populism to work and use the middle class and listen to the middle class to make the Republicans of the time, the progressives, the bull mooses of the time, and to be able to listen to their voters. And I think that's what the GOP needs to do now. I don't know when the GOP is going to learn that this is how you win elections. And that's just the period, the end. And that goes for any ideology. Look at Zohran Mamdani in New York City, who used populism to enforce communism into New York City. Populism is a vehicle in order to win elections. And our party needs to learn to do the same thing that it's always rejected to do over the last 100 years.
You brought up two great points. And people there was this initial freak out when Zohan was nominated. And once he was nominated, it was pretty much rest assured he was going to win, despite whatever they tried to do. And Zohan Mamdani is just the natural conclusion of what the Democratic Party has been trying to do for at least 25 years, move in the direction of a standalone, essentially a standalone socialist. And they've been doing it with their brand of populism, which, like it or not, is appealing to younger generations who feel left behind. They feel like they have no opportunities to buy home. The loneliness men epidemic is a big thing. Not being able to start families, doing all these other kinds of things. And so, as I joke with my guests when I talk about Mamdani, when he says silly things like, I'm going to make the buses run faster, and I'm going to make all these silly things that you and I go, that's just ridiculous. Young people or just people in general who feel like they've been left behind, who nobody is speaking for them, they say, okay, well, he's giving me a solution, even though even in the back of their mind, they may think it's not a great solution. It's at least something that speaks to them. And we're going to see more of this. I know out in the West Coast, either in Portland or in Seattle, they elected a socialist mayor, and she's a straight up socialist. She beat a Democratic candidate in the primary. So the Democrats are very close to not even existing anymore, because their version of populism, socialism, is what they're going to go for, because that's how they feel they're going to reach that mass population that you're talking about. And then the second thing I'll mention here, and I'll throw it back to you, is that the Republican Party is a party, and I'm just quoting you from your first line of your article at humanevents.com. It's a party of losers. They absolutely love being second place. They love going on MSNBC. Lindsey, I can't believe the Democrats are doing this today. It's like, well, what did you do for whatever time period you were in power, Lindsey? And he goes, well, that's not important. And it's one of these ridiculous things that they love fundraising off of how they're going to beat Democrats instead of actually doing things when they have power.
Yeah, and the entire issue with, I mentioned this phrase too. It's virtuous losses. Like it's like we're the party of moral victories, and I can't stand that, because moral victories is something great in terms of, and I guess the sports analogy could be applied to this too. It's like when you lose, like if you lose a game, like if you're cheering on your favorite team, well, at least we did this, at least we did this, at least we stood on our principles, whatever. Like unless you take lessons from that and actually translate them and improve on the next game, there was no point in losing at all. And that's what the Republican Party has failed to do. Like when we lose, it's all like, oh well, we lost. Like it's like we would rather lose and you know stand on principle with the John McCain's and Mitt Romney. Like if you asked Bill Kristol, Jonah
Mhm.
Goldberg, probably in his heart, Lindsey Graham, all of these moderate established country club Republicans, would they rather lose with Mitt Romney or win with Donald Trump? We all know what choice they would probably, in their heart of hearts, choose. Not Graham, I guess to his credit, has been somewhat loyal in his votes and things like that. But at the end of the day, he wants the Republican Party to be the neoconservative Bush Party it was in the 2000s. And my biggest issue, I think, is populism has been proven now to win and to work. Like in 2016, 2024, we've won more elections in 25 years. I mean, really, I mean, I guess you could count, I mean, the Bush era stuff, running against Al Gore and running against John Kerry, whatever. But in 25 years, in terms of the popular vote, in terms of the Electoral College, we've had our two most dominant victories have been by the same dude. 10 years apart, years and years and years apart. 10 years from the moment he started his movement in 2015 to the moment he won the 2024 election, nearly a decade, we looked at the same dude. And that proves that, like, people like populism. Okay, and this, I saw somebody comment on the article, like, why is populism such a bad word? And I'm not really sure of that either. I think it's because they associate it with dictatorships and they associate it with authoritarianism because do you know when people don't like populism is when populists lie.
Hmm.
And if and that is to earn power. It's just like like when these dictators get in these positions back in Europe in the 1940s and the 1930s. They run on a platform that is promising the world to the world, and then expanding their power, or at least setting the threshold so low that they get there, they earn the trust and they seize the power. But in modern day politics, all populism is identifying the elite that both parties do. Like it's like this entire thing, like with the Epstein files, right? I'll be honest with you, I think it's a bit of an overblown issue. I don't think the common voter cares about that much. But if you look to just the issue in general, do you know the reason people care about the Epstein files in general? It's because Epstein was an elite. It's because he was
Mhm.
because he was petted on by the elites of the world, and that pisses the common person off. Like that's a pretty simple equation. Like if there's a normal dude doing what he was doing and just a rich dude doing what he was doing without the elites of the world being involved, I'm gonna be honest with you, nobody would care. Like in our heart of hearts, morally, should we care? Yes, but the reason it's a political issue is because he rubbed elbows with the elites that populism is supposed to work against. Populism is supposed to speak for people that are too, not their wealth wise or not their influence wise. Like it's for to use and listen to those people and give them voices. That's the reason the Epstein files is an issue overall. It's the reason why we elected Donald Trump 2016. We took an elite and used him against his own because we were tired of the elites stepping on our throats. And I don't know when the Republican Party, or the Democratic Party for that matter, like the reason, you want to know the reason Kamala Harris lost in 2024? Like, there's a lot of reasons. Of course, horrible candidates, and she was establishment and everything else. Was because they took they took the primary voting process away. They didn't allow their people to be spoken for. They crowned a queen at that time to be their nominee, and they didn't listen to their people, and they didn't encourage their people to vote. That still factors in to populism and listening to a certain class of people to do the right thing or to be represented. That's all populism is. It's representing the normal common denominator American. And I don't know really when the Republican Party or, like I said, the Democratic Party are going to realize, hey, I hope we can look to Mom Donnie here, somebody who literally never accomplished anything in his life. Like he was an assemblyman, state rep, whatever that there is in New York. And this dude, this 30-year-old, is the next thing you know has beat a former governor, has and beat the current sitting New York City mayor in a Democrat primary in a general election, and you all still don't think populism works, really? Like that, it is just purely, please take us back to the Bush era conservatism, or take us back to the Kerry Democrat liberalism, and neither one of those are going to work. If the Democrats do not listen to the populist of their party, if they go to Gavin Newsom and establishment politics, like they're supposed to in 2028. And if the Republicans rightly go with J.D. Vance in 2028, who is a populist made in a lab, literally, if I had to take a prototype, like a literal Frankenstein populist, I would probably come out with J.D. Vance. I pray that it's the man they nominate, because I feel like he is the perfect person to lead us into the new populist era. So if the Republican Party just does that, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now, especially all these psyops that are trying to divide the Republican Party. It's really to get the Vance nomination off the rails in 2028. It's to associate these retrobates that are on in the enclaves of the internet that nobody cares about or nobody knows with JD Vance. So it tanks his nomination in 2028. Like anybody who is populist or sees any kind of relationship with populism can see exactly what they're trying to do. Me and Jack have talked about it. Me and Jack Posobiec have talked about it, and many others that are part of that populist right can see it plainly. That's exactly what they're trying to do, and unfortunately, a lot of our party is falling for it.
So you said a lot there, obviously, and I think it's great. Let's try to kind of pick through a little bit. The Epstein files has always been kind of an internet thing, and you got to lay the blame on Trump and his. And I voted for Trump 3 times. I guess I'll give that disclaimer. They talked about it on the campaign trail. All right, they talked about it on the campaign trail. Then they talked about it. Pam Bondi, who I will go on record, she is a terrible attorney general. Especially as a pro-gun guy, she has just been awful. She dropped the ball, and if she never dropped the ball by saying that she was going to release these things, then you had Binder Gate and all these other kinds of things. That's probably been, in my opinion, the biggest misstep that this administration has done. Was the fumbling, because Trump is a very media savvy man. We love him for that, because he's very media savvy, because he's lived his entire life in the public eye. But for some reason, the people he put around him just kind of fumbled this thing and put him in a position that he shouldn't have, your inner circle shouldn't have put them in. And that's, they're still suffering the effects of Pam Bondi going for that moment on Fox News. Well, you're going to have some breaking news right now. And, credit to Trump for being loyal to her, but, he should have really tossed her at the first sign, because she blew that whole thing. The second one is that they may try to position Gavin Newsom. I don't think it's going to work, because their party's gone too far left. They can't stomach having a white man run for the nomination. They put up with Joe Biden because Trump bad and they need to get rid of him. That was the only reason Biden was allowed to stay, because they thought he had a better shot. But if the field is open, I think they're going to push some kind of diverse candidate, because their voting block will demand of it. So I don't think they can even, they'll float Gavin, but Gavin with his podcast, he's almost too normy for that radical part of the left. And then finally, JD Vance. I like JD Vance. I like the fact that he is very internet savvy. I like the fact that he is speaking. He's the only one in the administration that is speaking to that Gen Z core that feels left behind. He stuck up for the kids in the group chat, which was very good. I think he said he recently, either yesterday or today, was speaking about the housing issue and what we need to do to address housing for those who are left behind. My only qualm with JD is that he's still relatively young. He was only a senator for 2 years. And despite all of his promises, he's still a little new to the process. Some people may find that as a positive. I don't think it's a positive or negative. I think it's just something that needs to be noted as he continues on. So I don't know if you want to respond to any or all of those points.
No, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that's true. I think that the Epstein files is a popular online thing. I think in the era of alternative media, especially when it was getting talked about as much as it was on podcasts and on alternative media, all these comedians talking about it, all of these big media companies talking about it, and the Netflix documentary also a form of alternative media, in my opinion, not cable
Mhm.
news, all that kind of stuff. Like it was becoming an ever-present issue that needed addressed, of course. And I think ultimately it has been now, and it took a long time. And I know it feels like it's been 3 years since Trump won the presidency, and it's only been 10 months. But I think we have to allow a little bit of time, and I think that's also one of the net negatives of populism, and because although I'm a populist, like a populist nationalist at my core, one thing that I think comes with populist nationalism is the need for solvency, a quick solvency, and I think that's at the same time of creating a lot of expectation and trying to deliver on promises. I think that the people that you have promised them to, it has created this sense of expectation that everything needs to get done quickly, and that has to do with tariffs, that has to do with the trade war, Epstein files, and everything else. And I think that we're kind of seeing that, with the approval rating of President Trump, which is still as high as Bush this time, Obama at this time, Biden at this time, whatever. But I think you're seeing a little bit of that frustration because of all the promises that you make with populism, or at least a lot of the acknowledgments of issues that you make with populism, saying that you can solve this, solve this, solve this, and not being able to follow up on that, not overall, not period, but quickly. 11 months into a presidency, wanting to make sure that you deliver on everything is hard. That's a hard thing to do, to deliver on everything, especially before the midterms of next year. It's hard to give this many wins as you've promised. And I think Trump's done a lot of good and delivered on a ton of promises that he promised during the 2024 presidential campaign. Has he done all of them yet? No, but I don't believe that anybody could, or even he, as you kind of proactive as his administration has been the last 10 months. I don't think anybody could kind of reciprocate that kind of way that he's done that, and the way he's done that since January. But again, that's also something that just comes with populism. If you make all these promises, people are going to expect you to follow up on them, whether that's the Epstein files, the trade war, whatever else, and then
Well,
you're going to have some mishaps along the way.
I
Also,
did, if I may, I know I promise not to. I only interrupt once or twice. I
yeah,
just want to reinforce the point. Trump has a lot of leeway on the trade war. Most people understand. I'm an
yeah,
American protectionist myself. I understand that tariffs will make things a little difficult in the short term for a long term gain. A lot of his
yeah,
base is fine with that. I'm the only thing with the Epstein files, and this will be my final point because I don't want to make this whole thing about that, is this was
sure,
a self-made error, right? This was
yeah,
nobody's expecting Trump to solve the world's problems in 12 months. But when you have members of your administration promising those things, because if Pam Bondi just said we're working on it, we're going through the files, Biden left us with a ton of stuff, we got to figure it out, we have a task force for it, we're ready to get after it, and we'll keep you guys updated as we go along. Most people would have been like, we trust you, Trump. You guys do your thing. She literally said, I have them on my desk and I'm going to give you guys this stuff on Monday.
right,
And that's the problem, is when you over promise. What's the phrase? Under promise, over deliver.
yeah.
She put Trump in that position of over promising something, and that's where I feel like it's the worst era so far in the Trump administration, because
Yeah.
something tangible was promised, and it was kind of like oh well, no it's not. And that one issue just kind of, I think any of the issues, if it was over promised and under delivered on that, would still get that same kind of blowback.
No, without a doubt, and yeah, I completely agree. I don't think Bondi, Patel, or anybody really associated with the Department of Justice probably could have saw the backlash that they were going to get, and I think that they made a lot of headline statements to draw those that kind of media attention for a reason.
Mm,
I think with the whole Epstein file handout, the 3 ring binders they gave out and all that kind of stuff, like it's just a sucky situation. I
yeah.
think that they overpromised too much on that, and at the end of the day, like it creates conspiracy theories. It allows Trump to be probably not rightly criticized, because I don't believe in any of this stuff that they're hiding thing. Like, at the end of the day, I don't believe that they're protecting anybody. I just think that there's not enough there. They're not able to do as much as they thought they did, and they shouldn't have overpromised, like you just stated. So
Maybe there's probably not
I
a list. There's probably there's no
that's
physical list.
correct.
It's probably deleted. That's the
Yeah,
crazy thing. Like there's probably
right.
nothing there.
Yes, absolutely.
So
There's probably the same call logs they handed out on the first day is probably there's elongated versions of that. There's probably
yeah,
emails, there's probably donor lists, there's probably financial statements, whatever. And I don't think that that's necessary. If that's the worst thing that's happened so far, I think that it is. I think it's probably the worst thing optically, and that's one thing that me and Jack talked about on Friday when I was in DC. We were talking about this very thing. It's to do with optics, right?
hmm
And these two things, I've seen the issue based polling, right? Like Epstein files rank like 15th or 16th on like issue polling. Nobody really cares. They do. Okay, I'm not going to say nobody cares. Okay, people do. I do. People that are in politics, people who care about politics, know the names. We care about it, and I think that's what you're seeing more than anything. Is that we are high propensity. Me, you, and so many others that pay attention to politics are high propensity voters. And I think it's who you're seeing the outrage from when it comes to the Epstein files. But like when it comes to issue polling, not that many people care. But you also have to ensure that those people are coming out too, especially when you're in your last term, you're setting up your predecessor to run in 2028. You have to make sure with your high propensity voters that you're not missing on a lot. You can miss a lot with low propensity voters because they're not going to
hmm
notice what promises you're not going to deliver on. But with high propensity, you've got to make sure that you're at least acknowledging and doing things, even the little things like the Epstein files, as acknowledging it and doing things as much as you can. It's kind of like the same thing last week when I was on with Jack. We talked about how Mike Huckabee invited Jonathan Pollard, who was an Israeli spy, literally convicted by the United States government of spying in the United States and giving things back to Israel and giving information over to Israel during the Cold War, and was put in federal prison and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. And Huckabee met with a spy, like at the Israeli embassy, literally behind closed doors off his schedule in the summer. And I don't think that's an issue that is so blown up or needs to be blown up that much. But you've got to make sure that you're batting pretty high. Like your batting average has to be pretty high. Like you've got to be
hmm
batting at least 30 or if you bat 30, you're going to the MLB Hall of Fame. In politics, especially with hyperbitsy, you got to be batting about 85 or 90. And I think that was a misstep. In the same way the Epstein files was a misstep. It's these missteps with high propensity caring voters that would probably go and campaign, phone bank, do all these things for Trump any day of the week, and now they want to see these benefits reaped. They want to see that their efforts, that their promotion during the primary, that the dominance during the primary, the grassroots efforts during 2024 by those like our friend and Rest in Power Charlie Kirk, Turn Point USA, Citizens Alliance, like all these groups that are dedicated to electing Donald Trump and America First conservatives, like to make sure that they're reaping the benefits, because this is exactly what they worked for. So you have to deliver not only promises you made to low propensity voters that you use populism to connect to, you also have to use the people that were passionate enough to come out and work for you and to promote you, to ensure that you're delivering on those promises too, to those high propensity voters, on things like the Epstein files, on
hmm
things like foreign policy, and all things like you said, like on the trade war. And I think if I had to pick a couple of things, I think the domestic policy, needs to be prioritized. I think there almost has been too much of a foreign policy concentration, and I'm a foreign policy guy, man. I love foreign policy. I'm an anti-interventionist. I'm not an isolationist, but I'm definitely an anti-intervention, pro-peace kind of guy when it comes to foreign policy, which I think Trump's been better at than any president of the modern century. But I think that oftentimes it's hard to sell foreign policy wins to people that are going paycheck to paycheck. Like that it's a hard sell to somebody who is not me. Like if I'm going out and I'm talking to people like, what has Trump done well? They're not going to care a lot of what he's done in the kind of like the Abraham Accords. They're going to care about the price of gas. They're going to care about inflation. They're going to care about how much the groceries are. I think if they're cities that they're living in, or if their crime is getting deterred by seeing the National Guardian, if the border's safe, if there's less fentanyl coming over the border, like those are things that low frequency voters care about. They don't care much about foreign policy unless it's literally the United States getting into a war. Like brokering peace deals looks great on television and looks great to high frequency voters, but these popular people that are kind of appealable to populism don't care much at the end of the day about things that are nationally known and nationally like on that like what makes cable news at night. Like they care
Mhm.
about things that actually affect them directly. And I think that's where we're going to kind of have to see how that approval changes, because I think that the things Trump's doing in the short term, kind of like we were talking about with tariffs a minute ago, like those, when those promises are delivered on, I think you're going to see a long term benefit, even if it's going to be a short term harm to his approval and to the Trump administration approval overall. I think overall, the next couple of years, you're going to see his approval kind of steadily climb because of those things he's been doing. But that's why at this time now, you have to make sure that you're delivering on your promises to private voters as well.
Yeah, exactly. Those it is a definite balancing act between your base, those people that are gonna be with you through thick and thin, and then Sally the soccer mom and Frank the football fan, the guys who show up, the people who show up and kind of just say, "Well, I'll vote for him because," or whatever the case may be.
Right.
Now, for populism, there's a couple things that really have seem to be laser focused in the last couple months. It's housing, big thing. JD Vance kind of is starting to address that more. The H-1B thing is got to be solved by Trump. And I know he tried to thread that needle and he stumbled a little bit. He tried to correct it, but and they've been trying to backtrack with the H-1B has probably been the biggest populism issue because it's directly tied to, like you said, people being able to afford or have a living or have even a chance let's just say a chance at the American dream. And so that's honestly, I think if Trump is going to have to find, if he really wants to see an improvement, he's got to find a way to work that H-1B slot and really show that he is putting American job workers. And yes, I've seen some of the things he has done some things here and there, but that H-1B thing is going to be a lingering issue unless they confront it head on. And that's going to be something that the tech bros and corporations are not going to like, because they like that cheap slavish labor. They love bringing in those people for cheap labor with the threat of deportation. And they're going to fight Trump on that. And that's where it's the populism is really going to demand, hey, you're going to have to, you're going to have to bite the bullet, for lack of a better term, on the H-1B issue if you're really for America first, American workers.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I like, if I had a strategy, I've worked on campaigns before. I'm not going to say that I've worked on huge campaigns or anything like that. It's been a lot of like statewide stuff. But if I had to just paint my perfect picture, I would get out in front and on the H-1B stuff. Like I'm against H-1Bs overall. Like I like it. Like me and human events and the populist right have been pretty consistent about being pretty anti H-1B, and I definitely am. I'm anti H-1B in every facet, just in the same way that I'm anti massive migration.
Mhm.
Not just am I anti illegal immigration. I'm anti migration right now. Like until we lower the amount of people that are coming in this country and we prioritize American workers before we prioritize anything else, like I don't want hardly any migration at all. It should be very rare we allow
I'm
people to
even
come
worse
into this
than you. I
country.
want a 10-year moratorium. I want a
Say
10-year
yes.
moratorium
Oh,
on it.
yes. Without a doubt. And that's kind of where I think a lot of, again, high propensity America First people like me are there. And but on the H-1B issue specifically, like if I had to just have one solvent issue, have Vance get out there and talk about it. He is on these kinds of issues and on immigration and on these working class people, like people forget, like Vance was is one of the only Republican senators in the history of the United States Senate that had an endorsement by the Teamsters, that had backings by unions. Like he was one of the only senators, along with Josh Hawley, who is willing to be like going out and working with unions and going out and working with the working class. Like Vance is that kind of populist nationalist. I would let if I had to answer that issue at all, I would have Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick sit down with JD Vance and go, look, we're getting killed in this H-1B thing. The president's made some statements on television that oftentimes we don't agree with. Go out and do an interview with go to all the mainstream news networks and do a sit-down interview about the need for American workers to be prioritized first within economics, and go do a roundabout with all the mainstream media and go through and talk about it and explain Trump's comments as well. Try to sit down and explain positions, because I think he and Ramaswamy, as much as people don't like Ramaswamy, I understand why, especially because he's pro H-1B on this specific issue too. But I think Vance and Ramaswamy are the two best orators that we have in the Republican movement. Like to me, if I had to rank them, they would be 1A and 1B. Now, regardless if you agree with Ramaswamy a lot of things, he is an unbelievable communicator. Like he would win speech contests if you didn't know what he was even talking about. If he was talking about the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, you would rank him as giving the best speech. He is a great orator. Same kind of thing with J.D. Vance. I would have literally a representative for the administration like Vance, who is as pro-American worker probably as anybody in the administration, go out and do mainstream roundtables, go out and do fireside chats, go to college campuses, and he did great when he went on the Turning Point USA tour with Erica Kirk, like going there and answering common college students. He went there and was asked a question about his Indian wife and why she was not a Christian, and how he was a recently converted evangelical to a Catholic, which I'm an evangelical. He's a Catholic. He went from being an evangelical to a Catholic. I appreciated that answer because it at least explained his journey. And I think he could do the same thing with H-1Bs. I think he could do the same thing with the Epstein files. I think if you send somebody like Vance there, who is the heir apparent and the guy who's going to be handed the baton anyway, let him start being the voice now after the first year of Trump. Let him start kind of making these kind of appearances. You don't have to just absolutely hand him the be the torchbearer or anything like that yet. That can wait until after the midterms, especially. But get him the opportunity to go out and communicate with the American people. Hey, I know you heard this, but listen to me about what we're actually doing about this issue on this interview. And I think that being able to communicate like that, it's a usage of populism. It's allowing a populist to go out and actually communicate with the people that voted them in, and be able to explain those positions. That's going to help, not skyrocket approvals, but I think mediate them. I think trying to, keep afloat, getting staying in the 40s consistently, climbing back up, before the midterms to around the 45, 46 area would be great. And I think this pure communication with the people that you talk to through using populism is how you win with populism. It's communicating and using the right orators to explain your position. And I think Vance and other members of the administration could do a great job doing that if they use it in the right direction.
So I do agree with Vance. I think Vance is very good at, he's got the training. He's a lawyer. He's very good at the speaking of points and breaking them down to make them very digestible. One thing that, and you can disagree or disagree with this, populism needs somebody authentic in order for the message to work. And that's why people couldn't understand with Trump. He's a billionaire. He has suits. He's got the golden toilet, blah, 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 blah. But he's authentic in what he says. And he's authentic in the fact that ever since he came down the escalator, he generally does want what's best for this union, for this country. And I think JD Vance follows that. I'm gonna push back just a little bit, and I'll definitely give you time to flesh it out. I do not think Vivek has the authenticity necessary to speak for the administration to stop the bleeding. We're seeing right now, as he is running for governor, that it's very early. I will give you that, but he is struggling in the matchup with the Democratic nominee, and the Democratic nominee is almost using the same talking points as he is, but there's just a level of authenticity that people seem to ascribe to her versus somebody like Vivek. And whether it's the fact that he went hard for the H-1B thing. We all know the famous Christmas Day quote where he called America, the jocks are lazy and all these other kinds of things. I think I don't think it's not a mistake you can't recover from. Politicians say stupid things every day. It's what they do. And they just kind of evolve and move on from it. But JD Vance has authenticity. I do not think he is an amazing orator. But for a lot of people, it almost comes by, and I'm not trying to say this as a negative, but it almost comes by as like a used car salesman. A used car salesman is probably one of the best orators you ever meet. That guy will he'll tell you 7 ways from Sunday. Don't worry about that dent in the door. It actually makes the car faster. And you're going to go, oh, yeah, you know what? It does make the car go faster. So that's just my problem with Vivek is that he lacked that authenticity, really needed to kind of drill down or stop the bleeding, if you will.
Oh, no, trust me, I don't want Vivek Ramaswamy speaking on behalf of the Trump administration. No, don't get it twisted. I do not want that at all. I think you're going to be able to see kind of how he changes a little bit, and I hope he wins the Ohio governor's race. God bless him. I hope he does. But no, I'm specifically talking about Vance. I think Vance is really talented, and the way that Ramaswamy isn't, because back bounce, I'm gonna say 4 years ago, back in 2021, I was more of a libertarian leaning guy, and I still have my libertarian leaning tendencies. Don't get me wrong, but I was far more of a libertarian in the way like I didn't like this populist nationalist idea. Like even like 2020, like I'm a pretty young guy. Like I'm 29. And I was still kind of coming into my own and being an activist and kind of knowing, especially when I started writing again, what circles what ideology did I really aspire to of what I wanted the future of the party to look like. Because I knew what I currently felt, but didn't really know what the future was going to look like. Really know what I wanted the party to be. And I was kind of questioning, what parts of libertarianism is kind of like, what do I believe in when it comes to libertarianism? I was like, I hate the nanny state. I hate the deep state. I hate the surveillance state. I hate these wars that we're getting into. But, where I kind of stop a little bit, now, especially when I started to evolve, was this idea that, I used to be kind of more of a laissez-faire, economics guy that didn't want the government to touch it. Thank God I'm no longer like that anymore. It used to be a pro-criminal justice reform guy. Not that much anymore. And there's just a lot of these things that I've kind of recycled. And back then, I didn't like JD Vance. I didn't like Josh Hawley. I actually came out with a hit piece on JD in Newsmax back in 2021, I guess, that like I read Hillbilly Elegy, and I'm sure you can tell by my accent, like I'm from Appalachia, right? Like I am from East Tennessee.
Couldn't tell. You got one by me on that.
Yeah. I was hoping you'd think I was from Arizona. But I wrote this piece kind of bashing JD, like, because I read Hillbilly Elegy when I was an English major in college, and I read Hillbilly Elegy, and I hated it. Like when I was in college, I hated that book because I was kind of looking at it from a literary perspective, and getting it like almost like a liberal sense of offended, like who is this guy from Ohio that thinks he can talk to Appalachians? It was kind of it was a very, very small minded way of thinking, and I'll readily admit that being a young college kid, like I did think that, like I was like, wow, this guy who moved down here just because his family lived down here, and struggled, thinks he can talk to Appalachians and relate to us, and he can't. And I think that was a very ignorant way for me to be thinking and to judge that book and to rally against him in 2020 and 2021. During his Senate campaign, like I wrote a hit piece on him saying people should vote for him in the primary. I was against him in the primary for the U.S. Senate position in Ohio, and he got in office, and and seeing what he did, Trump endorsed him. I saw what he did in the Senate, and it's kind of was the beginning of my turning of being more of a populist nationalist. Was during that time. As soon as JD got in there, it's not like he turned me or anything like that, into being a populist nationalist, but it's kind of at the same time he got elected was the same time after we lost the 2020 election where I started to go, look, this libertarian thing ain't it, man. Like this ain't it. Like I'm seeing too much going on in our country, especially in the COVID-19 stuff, Like, I witnessed too much to be willing to sit back and just let things happen like a lot of libertarians want. And then I started to kind of look into like the populist nationalist ideology, and I tried to like mix the two. I tried to like say, well, there's libertarian populism, and that's fake. There's no such thing as libertarian populism. And I was like, all right, I, I, I made myself. I remember in like it's sometime in like in early 2022, late 2021. I made myself sit down and read Elegy again. And I did, and I'm like, wow, this guy really does get us. You know, I started paying taxes. Then I had a full time job. I was no longer in college, and I was like, all right, you know, this guy really does understand the Appalachian way. And I read an article that said I was wrong on about J.D. Vance, and that was before he was ever vice president. It was before he was ever going to even think to be the next vice president. It was while he was in office, and you know, I think that listening to JD and the way that he explains his positions, whether that's reading the words that he wrote on a page or listening to the man speak, like he's just very good at really talking to the working class. Like if a critic like me can change, and it's not like he ever like he did anything to me. Like it's not like he reached out to me and said, "Hey man, what's this article about?" Like he didn't do that. Like I wrote a hit piece on him. I realized I was wrong. I read his book again, and I realized he was right. And now I would literally crawl for broken glass to go and vote for him for president. Like that's what populism can do at the end of the day, because you are speaking to the people that are struggling the most. Like I live in Cott County here in East Tennessee in Appalachia, and we're one of the poorest counties that there is in Tennessee. And that's not me being rude. That's not me being insulting. That's literally the way that it is, because East Tennessee is riddled, and Appalachia itself is riddled in low socioeconomic bases. And I think that JD knows how to speak to those people because, you know, he went through it. Like his family, he was, you know, his mother was a drug addict. His grandmother literally pulled himself up by his bootstraps and threw him into the fire and put him in that. He was eventually a Yale graduate and a Marine. And I think that the way he can not only orate, not only the way he could speak, but his experience is populist. Not only is the words coming out of his mouth populist, and is exactly what you want to hear if you're a person who is appealable to populism, but his experience is like he's a working class guy. To me he is the first one of the first modern day working class vice presidents, or a working class person who's eligible to be the president of the United States. So I think, you know, with Ramaswamy, 100% agree. Yeah, I don't want him speaking on behalf of the MAGA movement. I want him to win in Ohio. Don't get me wrong, and I like
Yeah.
Vivek. I think he's fine, but he's definitely not one of my favorites. I think he's talented, but I think with Vance, like again, he's the populist Frankenstein man. Like if I had to take his story, his voice, his look, his coolness, how the guy can just sit on a podcast with Theo Vaughn or Joe Rogan and sit back and shoot it with some of the biggest podcasters in the world, and they come away loving the dude. You know, he's talking about sitting there and talking about Ohio State football. Like the dude is just he's easy to like. Like there's reason right now currently as it sits on Real Clear Politics, he is the least hated man in American politics. And that's not me being hyperbolic or anything. He literally has the lowest disapproval rating in the United States of any politician. And there's a reason behind that. It's because he knows how to speak and orate to the right people.
Yeah, he also, due to his training as a lawyer, he we love Trump. We love the fact that Trump goes off the cuff. They're great. They're great memes. They're great truth posts or whatever, and they're great sound bites. But sometimes Trump just kind of gets in his own way, where he tries to over-explain something. You see, JD is almost an evolution of that, where he understands. He'll take an extra moment in order to make what he's saying correct, as any lawyer, any good lawyer will do. So you can definitely see that advancement. I agree completely. I do have some. I don't trust any politician 100%. I'm not saying you do. So I have some obvious issues with Vance, but I have issues with every politician. But just want to segue because we've gone pretty long on this. In order for populism to really take hold, in the conservative movement, which you're arguing for in your article. Like, we need to, the conservative side, GOP, they need to embrace it. They also, I feel, need to embrace the spokespeople for it. And I'm going to throw this to you, and you can disagree with me or not, but the most prominent voice in the media space, not the political space, in the media space right now for populism is Tucker Carlson. And the fact that he has ventured out on his own, whether it's interviewing a person like Nick Fuentes or going on these podcasts and just kind of speaking a more populist tone, the vitriol that's been pushed his way is only going to separate the GOP, the establishment GOP, from that voter base. Because after Trump, the people that base trust is Tucker Carlson, for lack of a better term. When he was on Fox News, his monologue was must-see television for everybody. And he still does when he's reporting. He does incredible reporting. But because he's gone off, for lack of a better term, the conservative reservation, he's been met with nothing but attacks. And I think the GOP needs to be very, and the establishment media space needs to be very wary of doing that, because yes, he's an elitist too, but he definitely has his pulse on the ideas of populism that most people in the establishment media just won't even touch or don't think they need to. And I think the attempted alienation of Tucker Carlson is going to do more bad for them than good.
I absolutely agree. I actually wrote a column on this a couple of weeks ago, that was about how, Republicans don't know their enemy, and their enemy is not Tucker Carlson. And it blew my mind again that people fell for this division that's not there. Like, the Republicans don't hate Tucker Carlson. Like, my people don't. Like, I'm sure there's people. I'm sure there's people that didn't like it. Like, and listen, I come from the evangelical South. I know there are people that like probably saw those clips of Nick Fuentes on social media and going, "Oh, well, why did Tucker? Why in the world would Tucker interview this guy?" And I'm sure, and I don't like Nick Fuentes. I don't know. I personally don't know hardly anybody that hardly knows who he is around me. Now, again, how the people who like politics I talk about it with, they do. But like the modern day person in the South, evangelical South, that knows who Tucker Carlson is, they don't really know who Nick Fuentes is, and they're like, "Well, why is Tucker getting canceled?" And then they look into it, and then that just grows Nick Fuentes' base. So who are you giving wins to at the end of the day? So you're helping this guy who you canceled grow his base, right? Who he interviewed. You're helping him grow his base by canceling Tucker. You're punishing Tucker, and along with that, you're alienating people who love Tucker, like me. I love Tucker. I would, if I got a call tomorrow to go on Tucker Carlson's show, I'd cancel my plans and go wherever he wanted me to go. Like, I'm a Tucker acolyte, dude. I love Tucker. I love Carlson, and I think he is, like you just said, one of the best communicators, because Tucker doesn't act smarter than anybody. And I think that's one of the best things about that populist kind of mindset is like, listen, to be a populist intellectual, you don't have to be an intellectual. As long as you're willing to listen to the people that matter, that the people who actually go and work on their hands and their knees for this country. You don't have to be a Harvard professor or a Yale graduate to understand how populism helps this country. And I think that's what Tucker's always, because whenever you hear Tucker talk, the first few things he says was he'll preface something and he'll say, "I'm not the smartest man in the room. I'm far from it, but I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to know what people think. I want to know what people think, so I can expand my own viewpoint." That's all that this new version, this new conservatism is. It's finding out why people think the way they think. If people are angry, if it, like I'm legitimately interested in like why Fuentes has a following. Like I've listened to him. I don't find him appealing. It's nothing that I would aspire to be, but I want to know why, though. Like, I want to know why that there's these young men who feel disenfranchised in our country that listen to this guy and literally identify themselves with him with a moniker. Like, I want to know, and we should want to know. They're not these reprobates. They're not reprobates that are the scum deplorables that Hillary Clinton wanted us to be in 2016. Like, why are they listening to this kid? Like, why are they listening to this 27-year-old on Rumble more than they're listening to, Jack Posobiec, more than they're listening to me, more than they're listening to you? Why are they listening to this guy? Let's ask questions and see why. We shouldn't punish the guy who's asking the questions. We should want to be asking the question ourselves. Like, Carlson should not be punished for simply having a conversation and wanting to. Because I remember Carlson days afterwards went with Megyn Kelly and he explained, like, do you all realize that this guy insulted my wife? Like, I promise you, I dislike him more than you do. You know what I mean? Like Nick Fuentes has never done anything to me or to you, Rick, but he's done something to Tucker Carlson, and Carlson was willing to have a conversation with him. That shows what kind of power Tucker Carlson has. And Republicans were too concentrated during the New Jersey and Virginia elections on that division in our party and that division in our movement to even concentrate on somebody like Jay Jones, who wished death upon Republicans and assassinations of our children more than they cared. They cared more about Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes and Kansley Tucker than they did about that. And that tells you the story of the Republican Party overall, is that we prioritize things like Kansley Tucker Carlson over actually winning elections.
So bringing up the subject of Fuentes, for lack of a better term, you may not like. I don't watch his stuff. It doesn't mean he's a political entity. People follow him. I had another guest on who explained his. He's a guy who listens to Fuentes, and he brought up all his points. For lack of a better term, or for lack of a better way to think about it, this group of men, this Gen Z group of men, this populist movement, if you will, Kenny, the guys you're going to want to come out and vote for JD Vance and the people in the midterms, they feel like nobody's listening to them. They feel like, and when they feel like there's nobody to listen, they're going to seek somebody out. And Fuentes just happens to be the person that has picked up that baton or has been given that mantle. Give the kid credit. He has built up his audience through whatever work he's done. But the GOP may not like it, but that is the Nick Fuentes' audience is a populist movement that the GOP is going to have to find a way to tap into down the line if they want their party to exist. And so that's quite a predicament they're in.
Yeah, I think we can learn lessons. I think we can learn lessons from people like that. I think there is a way that you can learn. It's just like studying things in college, like studying something and learning a lesson from it. It's so amazing to me that they're so interested and they know all these things that he says and all these bad, like they've watched enough of him to know what he says and why they disagree with it, but they're not willing to listen to what really is appealable about him, because there's something. We're not all just sitting back and going, but the entire world isn't sitting back and clutching their pearls over him. He has a following. He got invited on Patrick Bet David. People seem to forget about that podcast he went on that also exploded his profile. Like, if he's big enough to be invited on these podcasts, Piers Morgan invited Nick Fuentes. He's not going to go, but he invited Nick Fuentes for an interview to press him on things. So there's obviously enough there for people to find him intriguing and interesting. And I find his movement interesting in the way that I want to know why people follow him. And I think that's a fair question. I don't think, in the same way that I'm interested in why people follow AOC or Zohran Mamdani. I am interested. There were Mamdani, New York City Trump voters that voted. There are people who voted for Trump, also voted for Zohran Mamdani. I want to sit down with those about 700 to 1,000 people and say, why in the world would you vote for Zohran Mamdani and after you voted for Donald Trump in 2024? Same kind of thing. I would like to sit down with a Nick Fuentes person, not necessarily Fuentes himself. Carlson did that, get on Tucker. But I'd like to sit down with somebody who actually believes in what Fuentes is selling and say, look, dude, like, I've heard all these things Fuentes says. I don't agree with him, but why are you such a disciple to this guy? And to hear their explanation. Like, I think that's an okay position for us to be in. And I don't think that's really that controversial. Like, I didn't even understand really at the end of the day like besides the whole cancel culture thing, like I didn't really understand why they were demonized. I think it's because of the trope that conservatives fall victim to is identifying certain parts of their movement because they've always been because I think there was a point in somewhere between 2016 and 2024 and maybe even like 2018 and 2025 where the anti-Semitic party was always the Democratic Party.
Mm,
And I think the Republican Party really got used to using that trope against Democrats, and like I think it's just expanded. Look, I, I understand like the whole the APAC stuff, the Israeli influence of their government into our elections and things like that. Like I look at it from a scope, and I understand that perspective, but I think it's more than that. Like I that's always been there. So I think there's something else a little bit more to it. I legitimately just think the Republican Party is dumb sometimes. I think that we allowed that trope in the same way that we use a whataboutism. Like, well, what if the Democrats were in power, if the Republicans were in power, they'd be imprisoning Republicans if they had, just the whole whataboutism thing that Republicans always clutch their pearls about and do nothing about. The same kind of thing has been done with anti-Semitism is the Republicans were so used to using the anti-Semitic trope to attach that to Democrats that now they feel like whenever somebody is canceled for anti-Semitism, that all of a sudden means that they're going to be associated with the Democrats, so they have to make them their enemy. Like it's the weirdest kind of
mm.
thing. Like I legitimately think there's some people that probably call Tucker an anti-Semite that like don't believe it. Like it just felt like as soon as they probably didn't watch a minute of that podcast, but they went ahead and called Tucker an anti-Semite because they had that guy on, like because they had Fuentes on without watching a moment of it. They feel like because they've used that metric and that trope so much that they have to automatically just say, "Oh, now he's gone. He's going to be a Democrat. He's going to be a progressive. He's going to go wow." There's no difference between Tucker and between Bernie Sanders. Like it's like that's happened with the whole Tucker Carlson Fuentes fiasco, and I don't think it's anything like no, don't get me wrong. I do think there's like people like Randy Fine and others that are in the American government that probably do prioritize Israel first and probably do not take our country's considerations before Israel and things like that. That 100% happens. Do not get me wrong. I am not saying that doesn't happen.
I don't mean to stop you, but Ted Cruz
Yeah.
he just got booed off stage at an
Yes.
event
Yep.
because he says, if you don't
Exactly.
stand with Israel, I won't stand with you. And people are
Sure.
going, bro, you're a representative from Texas. Like, what are you
Right.
doing? And so
Yeah,
that
that's kind of
mindset.
what I mean. Yeah.
And
That's kind
so
of what I mean.
and just another factor that I feel I have to point out for the respect to the audience and to you,
Yeah.
it doesn't help when you have somebody with a megaphone like a Ben Shapiro who has essentially made it his mission ever since the Tucker interview came out. He has just been on a rampage about Nick Fuentes and how awful he is, and he has a problem with him, and he and it does two things. First, it expands Fuentes's profile because Ben Shapiro is literally spending days talking about he's like a jilted ex-girlfriend at this point, the amount of times he's talking about him. And secondly, it goes, well, why are you so angry at what he's saying? And then that brings people to dive into what Fuentes is saying. And that's kind of it's an error. It's a self-forced error on the conservatives' part. Let the interview happen. Okay, interview's done. But when you concentrate so much political firepower on the kid, America is a land of underdogs. They're going to be like, why is this entire establishment going after this 27-year-old kid who just was interviewed on Tucker? And
Right.
so that's the kind of damage, the kind of the loser mindset of the Republicans, where they're going to put so much effort, as you were saying, during that election cycle. They put so much effort onto it. And you even had, I know people at Human Events and other places were like, can we just stop for 5 seconds and try to focus on these elections instead? And people are like, nope, we have to talk about this. This is the most important thing. We have to talk about it. And it's jarring to a lot of people that his presence elicited such a firestorm of a response.
Absolutely. And then in that same fashion, if people didn't cancel Carlson, Not only do people cancel Carlson, like Shapiro and that blowhard Mark Levin, like let alone that happening, you have people like Matt Walsh, Megyn Kelly, and Brett Cooper getting canceled. Like, are you, because they wouldn't cancel Tucker? Not only because they didn't say the podcast was great, they didn't say that Fuentes is right on everything, they didn't say any of that. They didn't say there's literally not a point during that period where Kelly, Cooper, or Walsh endorsed Nick Fuentes or any of his sayings or anything like that. They literally just said Tucker is our friend. We love Tucker, and Tucker is still a pillar of the conservative movement, and we're not going to cancel him over it. That's all they said. And that got them ostracized by a lot of the Republican Party. And that is mind blowing to me. It's just kind of, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like with Cruz and Randy Fine, with Mark Levin especially, and all these others, like saying these things, like what do you expect people to think? I at the end of the day, like I don't know that now. Fine's been pretty clear, but like with Levin and Shapiro, and Cruz, like I've met Ted Cruz. I like Ted Cruz. I think he does. I think he's a pretty good U.S. senator, a really good U.S. senator, if I might even say. But like when you make statements like these, what do you expect at the end of the day? You know what I mean? Like even if you don't mean it, and even if you're not voting on a country's behalf that's not your own, like what do you expect? How do you expect people to react? And that's an unfortunate thing. Is like we are so. It's like we continually, like the moment we grab victory, we grab losses out of the jaws of victory. Like we see a defeat that we could just let die, but we've got to save it from the jaws of victory. Like it's incredible the way Republicans do, and the fact that we made the 2025 midterm elections more about Tucker Carlson and canceling media figures and politicians who did not denounce Nick Fuentes and did not denounce Tucker Carlson just tells the entire story for me. And that's really where this entire article and these thoughts have come through about populism and nationalism, is because I'm seeing these anti-Semitic tropes be used to attack people that are populists, like that aren't anti-Israel. Like none of these people that I've talked about, like I'm not anti-Israel. That like I wouldn't consider Megyn Kelly or Matt Walsh or Brett Cooper of all people, who's just a sweet 24-year-old girl who's become a great social media influencer. Like they're not anti-Semitic. What are we like? What are we doing? Like at the end of the day, like these people who I followed Megyn Kelly and Matt Walsh since I got into politics, and I've never heard them utter a word about being anti-Semitic or anti-Israel. Like I've never heard. I mean, and Brett's not been around long enough for me to really say I've known for so long. But like these people who they're calling anti-Semitic, I'm just going, what are we talking about? Like these, like this trope. It's kind of like they're being like the racist insult. Like you use it so much, it loses meaning. And that's beginning. What's beginning to happen with anti-Semitism is that's reserved for people who legitimately have a direct hatred towards Judaism and towards the Jewish people. Don't call somebody who's just having a conversation, or somebody who's not willing to cancel somebody for having a conversation, anti-Semites or Jew haters. They're not. Megyn Kelly, Matt Walsh, Brett Cooper, and yes, Tucker Carlson are not anti-Semitic. They're not anti-Jewish. They're not. And Republicans really need to quit using anti-Semitic in the same way Democrats made us kind of back off the being offended by being called racists or fascists. We need to stop that legitimately.
Excellent. Last question I have for you, Cody. President Trump calls you in. You got 15 minutes with him. Nobody else is in the room. He wants 3 things from you that he would try to enact. He wants 3 suggestions from you on how to right the ship, or what can we do to really make the Trump agenda really pick up steam going into the midterms and through the end of the term.
Oh man, I would love to see, and that's a really good question. I'll be a little bit biased with the first one. I'd probably want I'd probably want some direct infrastructure investment into the Appalachians or into business investments, because like the Appalachian Regional Commission, which is a federal department, I would like to see them make some more investments and some more concentration on the North Carolina Tennessee border. Like we're still suffering from the flooding back a
Yep.
couple of years ago. We're still suffering from the typical rural socioeconomic factors that our people suffer from with job loss. I would want more ice rates in the Appalachians. I think that we struggle from the opioid epidemic more than any other region in the country, and I still think that sometimes, even though we're busting a lot of these big cities, I think that I think it's great that Memphis is getting busted. I think it's great Knoxville, Nashville are getting these ice busts. I want to see some ice raids in the Appalachians. Like send ice here because the opioid epidemic is killing more people of 18 to 29 in my area than anything else. Like overdoses are the main concern here when it comes to deaths amongst my age group, and I want to see more of a concentration here. And the third thing, if I had to pick something that would just grab eyes, like this is something like first two things are kind of more my region. I like to see a couple more pardons. Like I for one, like, and this may be an unpopular pick. I kind of want to see a Snowden pardon by the end of his term. Like I want to see that the biggest anti-surveillance bump that we've ever seen in American politics. I would like to see Edward Snowden get pardoned. Like I've wrote about that. I've went on record about that. Um, I would want to see two rural concentrations, two regional concentrations, definitely some more investments here. Definitely some of the Appalachian Regional Commission, definitely making some more changes here. Definitely want to see some more ice raids in the Appalachians and ensure that we can see our overdoses go down here in the region as much as possible, and especially when they're recovered from the floods. And just one national issue, if I had to pick them from, probably be a Snowden pardon.
Well, that's excellent. I appreciate you taking. We went over an hour, and it was fantastic. If let people know where they can find you, sir.
Yeah, they can find me on at Katie Cody TN on Truth Social and on X. I'm especially pretty active on X. I usually just post my articles to Truth Social as links, but I talk to people through X. I tweet about every day, so they can find a lot of my posts there. And you can find all of my articles archived at humanevents.com. And I encourage everybody to look at humanevents.com for all kinds of opinion and analysis from our great staff of writers.
All right, folks. Well, that's it for another episode of the Barrett Breakdown. If you like what we did here, like, subscribe. Make sure you share the show with everybody you know. Get these conversations out and let people understand the issues a little better. I want to thank our guest, Kenny Cody, for hanging out with us. All right, folks. We will talk to you all next time. God bless and Viva Cristo Rey.